ChatGPT can write you a book in minutes, but do you know of a single person who wrote a book with ChatGPT really quick and then went on to become wildly successful with it? Even before AI was here, most books failed. And now with AI generated books, we've got more books being published overall at a lower quality. So the chances of writing a book with ChatGPT and succeeding are very, very low. However, there is one thing you can do that will make your book great. ChatGPT does not know about this. You have to instruct it on it. But when you do, the rest is downstream. ChatGPT can help you write a book that's going to stand out, that's going to be remembered. The people who read it are going to tell their friends about it, and you're going to be able to achieve your goals, whether it's to sell more books or grow your business. And this one thing is called the big idea. The big idea is the single most powerful factor that makes or breaks a book's success. If you get it right, your book will succeed. But if you get this wrong, the book that you write with ChatGPT is basically going to just make you look bad. It's going to end up in the dust pile with the thousands of books that fail every single day. I've made over $2 million off of the back of my little self-published books, and even more than that for my clients. And when I work with a client, the very first thing we get right is the big idea. And then we're able to write a book that helps them achieve their goals. Here's a story to illustrate that. So I just got done working with a client named Mike. And Mike is a very successful real estate investor. In fact, he has this method of real estate investing where he actually assembles a partner network. And he might have someone who finds the deals, someone who funds them, someone who fixes the houses up, someone who manages it. And he assembles all those people together, and he's able to invest in real estate without really having to do the work directly himself. And he's been able to become very successful. And he now leads a mastermind of 250 real estate investors. And this partner network approach, that is his bread and butter. And he came to me to get help writing a book on this topic. Now, when he came to me, he already had some of the manuscript written, but I noticed some obvious issues with it right away. Like some of the book was about this partner network thing, and then some of it was just like these very generic chapters on how to invest in real estate, how to get started as a beginner, how to pick a great market. And so these chapters were disconnected from his partner network approach. Mike is a very savvy businessman. He's way more successful than me, but this was his first time writing a book. And no one had ever told him about this thing called the big idea. The big idea was actually invented by a guy named Michael Masterson, who ran the copywriting division for Agora, this 9-figure company. And he's gone on to become wildly successful and write a bunch of really great business books. And basically what Michael found is he analyzed all of his newsletters that he sent out to the Agora customer base. And what he found is that the newsletters that did the best, they presented one big idea each. Like it might be a newsletter about why someone should write an ebook to grow their business. Why they should, remember? Not how to do it and the 10 biggest mistakes to avoid, but just why they should write an ebook to grow their business. That's just one idea, right? A piece of content should really just center around one big idea. Now, the same thing is actually true for books. A book should have one big idea that acts like a golden thread that goes through the entire manuscript, chapter by chapter, and holds the thing together cohesively. The big idea for your book is simply this. It's one sentence long, and it just states the philosophy or the idea for your book. Mike's big idea was simply this. It is much easier to be successful as a real estate investor when you build a network of partners. Yet, because he had not fully seen that and clarified it, his book was starting to read a bit like a real estate investing encyclopedia. And what can happen then is you start to stuff more and more chapters into it. Like, well, maybe they should know this, and maybe I should write something about this. But if they do not support that one big idea and tie back to it, then your book just becomes this thick textbook that no one wants to read. And I get a lot of people that come to me and they've written like 100,000 words and they want help organizing it. The reason why they're in that situation is because there is no big idea. They've essentially written like 3 books and they've got them all crammed together. Instead, as we're going to talk about a little later, it's better to segment your ideas and write individual books around each. So when Mike and I discovered what his big idea really was, then we were able to go in and refine it. When we wrote chapters on handling the objections that the reader is going to have, which is critical, the objections were about having a network of partners. Like, even if I get a lender, won't I still have to bring some of my own money? Or what if these partners try to steal my deals? Or what if I lose too much equity by giving it away to the partners, right? So everything, all the different chapters where we address those objections, what are those looping back to? They're supporting our big idea. Instead of beginner mistakes to avoid, it's mistakes to avoid when building your partner network. Instead of how to pick a real estate market, it's how to find a local market expert and add them to your partner network. Every chapter just continues to answer this question of how do you actually succeed as a real estate investor with a partner network? So the chapters are all like these little support teams under this one big idea. Let me give you another example. So about 15 years ago, I was having some health challenges and I pick up this book on my mom's coffee table about the power of eating high nutrient foods. And so I started doing that. I started having tons of like green smoothies and salads and soups and just really high quality whole foods, lots of vegetables. It cured all my health challenges. And to this day, that's the way that I focus on eating. And one thing that I don't ever have to do now is count calories or fat, or I don't worry about macros at all. So I could write a book on this eating philosophy that I have. I don't plan to, but just hypothetically, I could. And if I was going to write that book, I'd have to clarify the big idea for it. The big idea could be, you will never have to count calories again when you choose the right foods. That's it. So it's a book that saves readers from having to count calories by teaching them the right foods to eat. Solves the problem with that solution. So in that book, I'd have a chapter explaining this philosophy and how I discovered it. I'd have chapters busting down the objections, like people were going to say, but counting calories is proven to work, Brian. I'd have to address that. And then maybe the high nutrient foods have some downside or perceived downside that I would have to address, right? But again, I'm just talking about this one big idea. One of the things that I learned is that a high nutrient food like spinach also takes up a ton of space in your stomach. Like that big clamshell container of spinach from the grocery store, it's like 100 calories, but you couldn't even eat it all because you'd get too full. So a lot of the high nutrient foods tend to be very fibrous and to take up a lot of space in your stomach. Thus, they make you feel full long before you can actually eat too many calories, which would make you gain weight. And so I would have a chapter about that. And I would show the stomach full of spinach versus the stomach full of olive oil or something that's super calorie dense relative to how much space it takes up. What I would not have is long rambling chapters about the woes of the healthcare industry. I would not talk about exercise. I would not talk about toxins or just generic nutrition philosophies. So you know how trains have train tracks, and they have them for a reason, because without it, the train would just go off the rails and crash. And the book's big idea is the train track. And what it does is it actually keeps your book from going off the rails. So when someone reads it, the track all the way from the introduction through the conclusion It's all about that one big idea. And you can even use it to ask yourself, should I include a chapter about XYZ? And you just have to ask, does this chapter support the big idea? Is it necessary or not? When you write a book, less is more. And so it's often a process of stripping out unnecessary content. With attention spans being shorter and shorter, it's never been more important to have the skill of stripping away unnecessary information, of making things simpler. And often what I tell a lot of my clients is that the stuff you're wanting to add to your book is actually what needs to go in your next book, because they often will say, I want to write a book and I have this big message. I want to say this thing. Oh, and I also want to say this thing. And the two things they say are both so big that I'm like, those are two separate books. You would not try to commingle those, but there are a lot of published books that are essentially 2, 3, or even 4 books all wedged into one. I've bought these books and read them, and then I go look at the reviews on Amazon and everybody's saying how confusing the book. So please, I urge you to compartmentalize your ideas. Figure out what your one big idea is for your book and stay on track with that. Write a shorter, punchy book that gets that idea off really clean, and then you can move on to your next idea in a separate book. In the description, I've developed a prompt that you can just paste into ChatGPT, and it's going to walk you through the process of developing your book's big idea. And I've also instructed it to make sure that you stay on track in actually developing your book so that all the chapters continue to tie back to this big idea. If you do nothing else, this is what's going to give you a punchy and cohesive book that stands out, makes you a thought leader in your space. If you want to learn a lot more about how to monetize your book when it is done, you're going to want to check out this video. Thank you for watching.